I cried that night, quietly, with my back against the bathroom door so she wouldn't hear. I didn't scream, didn't punch the wall. I just let the tears fall. Because the truth had already cut too deep. She had laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a slip, a full, open laugh when I asked her if she still loved me. Like I had just told a joke. Like my pain was amusing. I remember the exact moment, her red wine glass in hand, leaning against the kitchen counter, that amused smirk on her lips like I was the fool for asking. Still love you. God, you're so sensitive. That's when I broke, not because I lost her, but because I realized I never really had her. But tonight, she's the one crying, on her knees, in the same kitchen. And I'm just watching, smiling. The kitchen used to be her favorite place. She'd play soft jazz in the background while stirring a sauce or slicing vegetables, glass of wine in hand, pretending she was on some cooking show. I'd watch her from the living room, smiling, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. That memory stings now. I came home early that day, not because I suspected anything, but because I missed her. I had picked up her favorite pastries from the little French bakery across town, the one we used to go to before life got too busy. I thought it'd be a nice surprise. Instead, I found the front door slightly ajar. At first, I thought maybe she forgot to close it properly. But then I heard it, a laugh, a man's voice, low and too comfortable, and hers, lighter than I'd heard in years. I didn't walk in. I stood there, frozen, pastry bag in hand, heart in free fall. They were in the kitchen, our kitchen. He made some joke about her training me well, and she laughed. That same laugh I'd hear again later when I confronted her. That cruel, dismissive sound that said more than words ever could. I backed away, closed the door softly, and left. I couldn't even breathe. I sat in my car for over an hour, pastries untouched, staring at the dashboard like it held answers. I didn't cry then. I just felt empty. That night, she came home as if nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek, asked what I wanted for dinner. I looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger in my wife's skin. That was the first time I truly understood what betrayal felt like. Not just pain, but humiliation. And it burned hotter than I ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many lies were buried in the silence between us. She smelled like perfume I didn't recognize. Not the floral scent she usually wore, but something sharper, muskier. I stared at the ceiling for hours, reliving that moment outside the kitchen, the way she tilted her head when he made her laugh. That tilt used to be for me. In the morning, she hummed while brushing her hair. Hummed as if her world was perfectly intact. She caught me looking at her in the mirror and winked. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, still brushing. I nodded. "Yeah, fine." Liar. So was she. That entire week, I watched her more closely. She had patterns, new ones. Her phone was always face down. She started taking evening walks alone, claiming she needed fresh air. She began locking the bathroom door, which she hadn't done in years. I never confronted her, not yet. I needed to be sure, not just for me, but for the years we'd built together. For the version of her I still hoped was real. So I did what I thought I'd never do. I followed her. It was a Thursday evening. She left the house in yoga pants and a hoodie, hair tied up. Said she was going to clear her head. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and tailed her car at a distance. She didn't go to the park. She didn't go anywhere near it. Instead, she pulled into a parking garage downtown, the kind near luxury condos and high-rise apartments. She parked, then walked to the elevator and punched in a code. The door opened. I waited. 27 minutes later, she came back down. She wasn't alone. He was tall, clean-cut, expensive suit. He kissed her cheek, whispered something. She laughed, again, and slid into her car. I stayed in my car the entire time. Fists clenched, jaw tight, soul unraveling. That laugh, I hated how familiar it sounded, how easy she gave it to someone else. I didn't go home right away. After watching her drive off, I sat in that garage for what felt like forever. The world outside moved. People walked, horns honked, lights changed. But I stayed still. I was afraid to go home, afraid of what I'd say. Or worse, what I wouldn't. I drove aimlessly through the city, passed by the bookstore where we had our first date, the bridge where she once danced in the rain. Memories ambushed me like bullets, relentless, sharp, unforgiving. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was almost midnight. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. She was sitting at the table, scrolling her phone, sipping tea like any normal night. She looked up, surprised. "You okay? You're late?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just got caught up at work." Another lie. She nodded, then returned to her screen. I stood there for a few seconds, watching her. This woman I no longer recognized. The lines on her face were familiar, but the soul behind her eyes wasn't the one I fell in love with. The next morning, I called in sick. I needed space. Not from her, from myself. I needed to think clearly, to plan. I wasn't going to lash out. I wasn't going to scream. That's what she probably expected. That's what most men would do. Not me. I started keeping notes. Dates, times, places. I created a folder on my computer labeled Finances. Code for everything I was about to gather. Screenshots, GPS logs, even a voice recorder I kept in my pocket just in case. I wasn't building a case against her for revenge. I was building one for freedom. For years, I had bent over backward to be the husband she claimed she wanted. I worked long hours to afford the vacations, the dinners, the life she said she dreamed of. But in doing so, I had starved the relationship of presence. Maybe I failed her. Maybe that's how it started. But nothing gave her the right to lie to my face while kissing me goodnight. She thought I was weak, predictable, naive. She had no idea who I was becoming. And I wasn't done yet. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role perfectly. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, sent the usual "I love you" texts at lunch, came home with groceries, sometimes even cooked. She didn't suspect a thing, or maybe she just didn't care enough to notice. That was the hardest part. Not the betrayal itself, but the sheer indifference she showed every day. It was like living with someone who had already moved out emotionally. I was just the ghost who still paid the bills, but beneath the surface, I was gathering everything. One evening, while she was taking a bath, I unlocked her laptop. The password hadn't changed in years. My birthday. I wish I could say I hoped to find nothing, that some part of me still held on to faith. But I didn't. I knew what I was looking for. And I found it. Messages, photos, plans, booked dinners, a weekend getaway. It wasn't just a fling. It was a second life. She told him things she never told me, about her dreams, her childhood, her fears. She used to share those with me, when we were still us. Now, I was just the backdrop to her new adventure. One message stood out. He cried last week when I told him I felt distant. Like, actually cried. I almost laughed. Men are so fragile. That line broke me. I had cried, not because I was weak, but because I was honest, because I still cared. And she laughed? That was when I stopped hoping for repair. There was no coming back from that. The next day, I visited a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Someone discreet, strategic, and fiercely protective of client dignity. I laid out everything. The affair, the finances, the house, the prenup. Every receipt I had gathered. She looked me in the eye and said, "You've done your homework. Most men don't." I nodded. I'm not most men. And from that point forward, every smile I gave my wife was calculated. Every dinner shared was documented. Every lie she told was met with silence and a click on my recorder. I wasn't staying because I was broken. I was staying because I was preparing the ending she didn't see coming. Something shifted after that. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was her. But our house grew colder, even though we still said good morning, sleep well, and love you like clockwork. The routines were there, but the soul was gone. I think she noticed, eventually. The way I stopped asking how her day was. The way I no longer touched her back in bed. The way my eyes didn't soften when she entered the room. She started trying again, in her own way. She made dinner one night, her famous chicken marsala, the one she hadn't cooked in over a year. She even lit candles and played our wedding song on her phone like it was some kind of romantic revival. I sat at the table, chewing slowly, nodding at all the right times. "You've been distant," she finally said. I set my fork down. "Have I?" She looked at me, eyes searching. I feel like you're pulling away." I wanted to laugh the way she had when I cried. But I didn't. Instead, I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Maybe I am." Her face froze for a moment. Then she smiled. Too wide, too fake. "We could go away this weekend. Just us. Reset." "Sounds nice," I said, even though I already knew she had plans with him that weekend. She didn't cancel them. She just tried to reschedule me around them. That was the moment I realized I wasn't married to a person anymore. I was married to a performance, a woman who wore her love like a costume, adjusting it depending on who was watching. So I did something I never thought I would. I wrote her a letter. Not a goodbye letter. Not yet. Just the truth. How I saw her. How I felt. How I was dying in silence. I didn't sign it. I printed it, folded it neatly, and slid it into the book she kept by the bedside. The one she never actually read. I wanted to see if she'd find it, if she'd care enough to look. Spoiler, she didn't. Not that night, not the next. But when she finally did, everything started to unravel. It was a Sunday morning when she found the letter. I was outside trimming the hedges, pretending I hadn't been watching from the window when she picked up the book. She opened it, paused, then pulled out the folded page. I kept my distance, glancing occasionally through the blinds as she read. Her expression didn't change much, just a slight narrowing of the eyes, a purse of the lips. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She came outside 15 minutes later, coffee mug in hand, and leaned against the porch post like it was any other day. "Did you write this?" she asked calmly. I nodded. "Yes." She took a sip of her coffee. "That's dramatic, even for you." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because the armor had cracked. She had read the truth, and instead of apologizing or reflecting, She mocked it. Again, I was done trying. That night, I emailed the final set of documents to my lawyer. Everything was ready. Timelines, bank statements, evidence. I even had screenshots of her latest texts to him. She had started calling him my escape. Ironic, considering what I was about to do. The next morning, I told her I'd be working late. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay, don't forget to grab milk. I didn't. I grabbed the milk. I also grabbed the spare key to our safety deposit box, where I stored every printed copy of the evidence, just in case. Then I drove to a hotel, not to cry, not to escape, but to breathe. I needed one night where I wasn't pretending. The room was simple, clean, quiet. I ordered takeout, sat on the edge of the bed, and read through the final draft of my letter of resignation. Not from a job, but from a marriage that had long expired. The next morning, she would receive it in a blue envelope on the kitchen table. And when she opened it, there'd be no name, no bitterness, just a single line. You laughed when I cried, so I smiled when you begged. But the begging hadn't started yet. That was still to come. I didn't wait around to see her reaction. By the time she walked into the kitchen that Monday morning, I was already gone. Not to work, not to the hotel, just gone. Driving aimlessly, radio off, windows down, letting the early air clear what little fog remained in me. She called me 37 minutes after her usual wake-up time. I didn't answer. She texted next, then again, then 5 more times. Where are you? Did you take the car to the shop? Are you okay? Can you please respond? What is this letter? I didn't reply. I gave her what she had always wanted, space. That afternoon, she showed up at my office, or tried to. But I wasn't there. I had already spoken to HR, taken leave, and set my email to auto-reply. Everything was in motion. Around 6 p.m., I checked into another hotel, a better one this time. She called again. I let it ring out. Then came the voicemail. Her voice trembled. Okay, you made your point. Can we just talk? Please. There it was. The begging. I saved the message. Not out of spite, but because that was the first time in years she said please to me, and actually meant it. That night, she sent a long email. Pages of apologies, confessions, justifications. She blamed stress, loneliness, my work schedule, even her therapist. But nowhere in that email did she say the words I had waited so long to hear. I chose this. I hurt you. Without ownership, there's no healing. I didn't write back. Instead, I sent my lawyer the green light. The next morning, the process began. She was served papers while sitting in our driveway, sipping coffee. She called me immediately, sobbing. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll do anything. I believed her. The same way she believed I wouldn't walk away. But I had already walked. All that remained now was watching her realize it. The house felt like a stranger when I returned to pack my things. She was there, sitting on the stairs, eyes red, hair unbrushed. The same sweater she wore 2 days ago, still clinging to her like a memory she didn't want to let go. You're really doing this? She whispered. I didn't answer. I moved past her, heading to the bedroom. My suitcase was already halfway packed from my hotel stay. I just needed the rest, a few shirts, my watch, the framed photo of my parents I kept on the dresser. She followed me, standing in the doorway. I made mistakes, I know that. But people come back from worse. We had years together. I paused, then turned to face her. Yes, we did. But the woman I had years with wouldn't have laughed when I cried. She flinched. Finally. A crack. I didn't mean to laugh. I was just scared. I didn't know how to react. You didn't know how to react to the man you once swore you loved breaking in front of you? Silence. I zipped my bag slowly. She stepped forward. Do you love me at all anymore? It was a question she never thought she'd have to ask. And I never thought I'd have to answer. I looked at her, really looked, the way I hadn't in months. The same eyes, the same freckles, the same lips that once said forever. No, I said gently. I love who you used to be, and I love who I was when I was with her. But that's not us anymore. She crumpled to the floor, hands covering her face, body shaking. I watched for a moment, and then, for the first time in forever, I smiled. Not because she was hurting, but because I wasn't, not anymore. The freedom wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was still. Quiet. Like the final page of a book you never thought you'd finish. Closing gently in your hands. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't throw one last insult over my shoulder or wait for her to come running after me. That's not how healing works. I just walked out, suitcase in hand, keys left on the counter. And for once, I didn't look back. The air outside felt different, lighter, like the weight I'd been dragging behind me for years had finally dissolved into the pavement. I drove to a short-term rental I'd found, nothing fancy, but it had sunlight, space, and no memories soaked into the walls. That first night alone, I expected to feel broken, lonely, regretful. But I didn't. I cooked myself dinner, played a record I hadn't heard in years, sat on the small balcony and watched the world move on, knowing I had finally started to move with it. She called twice that night, left one message. I miss you. I miss us. But there was no us anymore. The man I was when we said I do had been buried beneath years of compromise, silence, and neglect. And the woman she became. She wouldn't even recognize that man if he stood in front of her. The next morning, I started writing. Not letters to her, letters to myself. To the version of me that stayed too long, that tolerated too much, that cried and still hoped. I told him he did the best he could. I told him he mattered. I told him he didn't deserve to be laughed at when he was at his most vulnerable. And I told him something else. Something simple but long overdue. You are enough, even when they try to make you feel like you're not. That message wasn't just for him. It was for every man who's been told silence is strength, that pain makes you weak, that tears disqualify your masculinity. She laughed when I cried. But I smile now, because I didn't let that be the end of my story. Weeks passed. The calls slowed. The texts stopped. I think she realized I wasn't playing a game, that I wasn't trying to punish her or make her chase me. I was just done. One afternoon, I ran into her at the grocery store. Total accident. I was in the frozen foods aisle, comparing brands of lasagna. And there she was. Same coat, same perfume. But she looked smaller somehow. Like the armor had fallen off and she hadn't figured out how to put it back on. She froze when she saw me. "Hey," she said softly, like we were old friends who hadn't spoken in years. "Hey," I replied, neutral. "How are you?" "I'm good." She looked down at the cart. "Shopping for one?" I smiled. Turns out I'm pretty decent company. She gave a hollow laugh. "I've been seeing someone." I nodded. I figured. She hesitated. It's not the same. I'm sure it's not. That's all I said, because what else was there? No need to rehash the past. No need to remind her of what she'd broken. She lived with that every day now, not because I wanted her to, but because truth doesn't go away when you ignore it. When I walked out of that store, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the kind you fight for, the kind you earn. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote one last letter to myself. The final one. She begged, and I didn't smile because she suffered. I smiled because I survived. And that's the difference. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about redemption. Mine. The man she laughed at is gone. The man I am now? He doesn't need her laughter or her tears to know his worth. Not every story of betrayal ends with shouting or slamming doors. Some end quietly, with a packed bag, a deep breath, and a man deciding that his worth isn't up for negotiation. If you've ever been laughed at when you were hurting, made to feel small when you were giving your all, I hope this story reminded you. You are not alone, and you are not broken. Healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply smiles when the begging begins. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever walked away from something that no longer served your peace? Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Strength doesn't always look like what they expect. Sometimes it looks like silence and a smile.